Everything I need to know about relationships, I learned in business school. So I want you to try something a little uncomfortable, something a little different. I want you to think of dating as a market. And I want you to think of yourself as a product. Now look, I know you are not a product. You are a beautiful and unique human being. We can't put a price on you. You are priceless. But there is a reason that people talk about the dating market. You may not literally be merchandise, but you are trying to market yourself to possible partners. It's just that in this very special market, no money changes hands, or at least it shouldn't. And you're also a buyer as well as a seller. Why are we talking about this? Because I spent 2 years in business school learning how to solve the problems of matching buyers and sellers. And I also spent a lot more years writing about business. During that time, I also did a lot of dating. So for this special Valentine's Day episode, we're going to talk about how some of the things I learned in business school can help you beat out the market competition and find the love of your life. And hey, if it doesn't work out immediately, at least you'll have learned a little economics. But before we get into that, my name is Megan McArdle, and I'm a columnist at the Washington Post. And this is my new show, Reasonably Optimistic, a podcast about why, despite all the bad news, you should still be bullish on the most disruptive ideas in the world, including America. Reasonably Optimistic is where we push back on the doom and the gloom, not with denial. Problems are real, but with evidence and history and serious arguments for why the future is still worth betting on, including your future. So, if that sounds like you, please subscribe to us on YouTube, leave a rating wherever you get your podcasts, and share this episode with someone you know who's starting to give up. Because the goal here isn't denial or naivete, it's to stay reasonably optimistic in a world that often makes doom the default. Now, back to the episode. Okay, so let's start with the very basics of thinking about yourself as a product. And that is, first of all, just to understand, what is your value proposition? Everyone is a unique and special snowflake, but that means that you cannot be all things to all people. So first, start with a fearless self-inventory. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? How attractive am I? Am I maximizing my assets? But the other part of that, the more fun part, is that once you've thought about what you're good at, you can start thinking about your customer. That is the person you're looking for, hopefully to spend the rest of your life with. You got to know who you are, but also who they are. Often when startups will go out and they will pitch potential investors, they will look at what is the size of the total market of people who could use this. You should think about this in sort of the same way. Now, some of us are specialty products. Well, that narrows what economists call your addressable market. That can be a kind of sad realization as you say, oh, but I have to let all of those people go. But remember that you only need one. This is the best thing. You are not a startup. Startups will come in and say, well, this addressable market has 10 million people in it, and we figure we'll get 10%. And then investors will laugh at them because it's very rare to get to 10% of your whole market. But you only need to get to a tiny, tiny fraction. You just need to figure out who those people are. If you are a specialty product, if you are someone who is a little bit unconventional, look, I'm a libertarian, I'm a journalist, I'm 6'2", I have a lot of nerd interests. So on our first date, my husband and I exchanged comic books. This is not quite the usual package. You're better off accepting what the normal package is and figuring out what sort of person is going to be looking for you, because I guarantee someone is. One reason I want you to think about that is that I think a lot of people, and especially young people, they want to maximize the size of the market they can address. They want to be like the Cheetos of the dating market, a little bit appealing to everyone. But that's the wrong way to think about it. What you actually want to do is be something really, really, really special for the people who will be really, really special to you. You want to maximize market fit, not market size. You don't want to be Cheetos. You want to figure out who is looking for the special limited edition copy of you. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand this, at least at first, so they look around and think, I want to be someone else, someone more generically appealing, or at least they end up tempted to do what businesses call a brand expansion. So what's a brand expansion? Well, have you been in the supermarket lately and have you seen how many different kinds of Doritos and Oreos and Reese's peanut butter cups there are? Those are brand expansions. You can also do major brand expansions where you just decide that you want to go and do a completely different thing entirely. So those of you who are old enough to remember the 1980s will know that in the 1980s, there is a famous example of a beverage firm that decided that its brand was tired. It had been the market leader, but it was losing market share to its competition. And so they looked at the competition and they decided, nope, we need to change everything. We're going to completely rehab our product and we're going to make it into something different, something more like our competition. Now, they did a lot of market research before they made this decision. They weren't stupid. They had a valuable brand, but they were worried that if they didn't do something, the value of their brand would decline to zero. So they reformulated the product. They did a lot of market testing where they would go to supermarkets and they would hand people samples and ask them whether they liked this better than the old product. And in the taste test, it performed great. People were telling them, absolutely, yes, I love this thing. So after a lot of market research, they decided, okay, we're pulling the trigger. New Coke lasted just a couple months and it nearly took the company down with it. So it turned out that, first of all, a lot of people loved that tired old brand. And when you mess with something that people like, they get mad. So people who loved the old Coke got really, really upset when they took it off the market. But it also turned out that Coke's research wasn't actually structured to pick up the thing that mattered. So they were giving people these tiny sample cups in like grocery store parking lots and asking people which they liked best. But people don't drink soda in little cups when they're standing in a parking lot. They drink a can of it in their car or at home. And that's how you should think about marketing yourself in a relationship. Don't try to turn yourself into something that people will enjoy in small doses by building a fake front you can't maintain. Lean into the things that make you really special. The things that people are going to want in large doses day in and day out. I guess what I'm saying is it's fine to tinker with your packaging, get a haircut, change your clothes, but don't try to change the basic formula. That rarely works for the same reason that New Coke didn't work. The other problem with brand expansions is that you can dilute your brand. You become kind of generic. So when I was in my 20s, I would try to tamp down my nerd side because I thought that would make me unattractive. And instead, I would do things that made me more like other people. But actually what I was doing was diluting the thing that was special about me and the thing that my husband would eventually love, and the thing that, in fact, I would end up writing a lot about and attracting readers with. So instead of trying to expand to be all things to all people, think really hard about what you want in a partner and what kind of partner is likely to want you. Don't try to expand outside of your core competency. It just rarely goes well. So now, having assessed our product and our market niche, let's think about how you find someone in the big, wild world of dating out there. And the first thing we have to talk about is market failures. This is a concept that you may have heard about in an economics class or a history class or a political science class. It's something that you may have read in a column or an editorial. But what does a market failure mean? People often say things are market failures when what they really mean is that the market isn't doing what they would want. But that's not how economists think about the term. Remember how we talked about specialty products? You know, you can think of a specialty product as a bad thing. Wow, you're too tall to date most people. But a specialty product can also just be something great, like a Lamborghini, like an Hermes Birkin bag, or like any other thing that only has just kind of by nature a relatively small audience. That's not what a market failure is. A market failure is when, for whatever reason, the market isn't working properly. So in dating, failure doesn't mean you're failing or that you are a failed product. It means the system makes it harder than it needs to be for decent people to find each other. And there are a lot of ways that this can go wrong, but I'm going to focus on a couple that are really common and very relevant to the dating market. And the first is search costs. A search cost is basically what it sounds like. It's how easy is it to find another person, another product, something I'm looking for in the market, another job. We often talk about search costs when it comes to labor economics, which can give employers more power over their workers than they kind of should naturally have, just because it's too inconvenient to look for a job. It's also possible for that to go the other way, where employers might keep on an employee that they're not thrilled about because when they think about the process of actually finding and onboarding and training a new worker, it's just exhausting. And they decide they're just going to stick with the employee they have. Now, that's probably going to sound familiar to a lot of you in the dating market. Many of us have stuck it out in suboptimal relationships because we thought, I can't go back out there. And that induces a kind of market failure. It prevents people from matching with ideal partners. Another kind of failure is something called asymmetric information. People who've been following me for a while know that, in fact, that used to be the name of my blog, and it's still my Twitter handle. So what is asymmetric information? It's when I know something and you don't, and that actually makes it hard for us to do a transaction because I am afraid that I'm going to get taken. Let's be honest, when we go on that first date, we're always putting our best foot forward. We don't want them to know that maybe we're kind of messy, or maybe we had some financial trouble, or maybe our job isn't nearly as glamorous as we would like it to sound. We try to talk up a good game. But that actually introduces a potential problem because, look, I'm not saying that you can't go out and maybe leave the fact that you don't have a good relationship with your mother until the fourth or fifth date. That's normal. In fact, it would be a little weird if you tried to unload all of your psychodrama on someone who you don't even know if you like yet. But some people will be concealing much bigger problems than that. So trying to figure out what someone is actually like, again, in that not the 4-ounce sample size, but day in, day out, that's a big part of the dating market. And when it's too hard, the dating market often breaks down. And I think we've seen this on some of the apps. Now, look, again, I got married in 2010, but I do talk to people who are still on it, whether they're people my age or whether they're younger people that I meet in the course of my job. And for a lot of people, one of the ways in which there is asymmetric information in the dating market is understanding what people's intentions are. Because people can project, oh, I'm interested in a relationship. I might want something more in order to get just short-term satisfaction and then leave. And it's actually somewhat hard to distinguish those people from the people who did sincerely want something more, but then just realized that you weren't what they wanted. So how do you fix some of these market failures? Well, with asymmetric information, one of the key ways we fix it is, first of all, we can introduce more transparency. We can do better background searches on people. We can talk to people who know them and find out what they're like. We can also use something called signaling. And you know what? One of the most credible signals you can is to not be on apps and to try to meet people through friends. Why? Because those people can signal for you. When you join a community, and I don't just mean, your church, your bicycle group, any community that you join, once you've invested in it, those people know a little bit about you. They know who you are. They can vouch for you. If you meet people, make friends at work. If you meet their friends and it turns out that one of them is someone you'd like to date, that person can attest that you have a stable job and are doing pretty well at it. You can really minimize those search costs simply by building those credible signals, not just by trying to flash something or to fake a signal. What you need is a real signal, and those are best sent through other people. Now, let's think about how you do the search. The closest analogy in business to dating is probably a job search. Kind of the same thing, right? You are looking to form a long-term relationship with someone. And one of the commonalities there is that both searching for a job and searching for a life partner both kind of suck a lot of the time. An analogy might help. When I applied to college way back in 1990, I applied to 10 schools. That was for the time, an unusually high number of schools. And I also regret to inform you that the reason I had to apply to so many schools was that I had a very poor high school GPA. So the guidance counselor advised me to hedge my bets. These days, 10 schools is nothing. Why? Because the Common Application made it easy to send out enormous numbers of applications to other schools. Now, if you're the only person doing it, that's great. But if everyone's doing it, your odds haven't gone up. It's just that now you're doing a lot more work to get the same results, right? Look, if a college only has 1,000 kids in its incoming class, getting 3 times as many applications doesn't mean that more kids get in. It actually just means that the acceptance rate goes down. And we have seen this across university systems where, because it is easier to apply, colleges get more applications, but it hasn't created any more seats, and it hasn't necessarily even created better matches. It has just meant that people are doing more and more work for the same result. You've seen this also in employment. Now that it is effortless to spam your resume everywhere, HR gets a lot more resumes than they used to. And because they get so many resumes, they're desperate to figure out some way to winnow them down, which means that they often, they're looking for ways to automate their job. And so they filter on increasingly specific keywords that, if you talk to people in, say, the tech industry, will often end up filtering out really good candidates. Why? Because they had this hyper-specific keyword that they were using just to cut down the sheer volume of applications. So, how does this translate into dating apps? Well, isn't that a little bit what people are doing often? They are taking one of two approaches. They're swiping on everything. They're erecting higher and higher barriers to filter out all of those other people who are swiping. And that means that they're actually probably missing some good matches. So if you want to find someone that you're compatible with, you are going to have to make more effort. And you are going to have to put up with a fair amount of rejection, with people who say that you're not for them or they're not for you. I'm not going to pretend this is easy, although I think that this is when it is actually easier to think of yourself as a product. Product fit isn't for everyone, right? When you go out and apply for a job, obviously you want the job, you need to pay your rent. When you go on a date, obviously you would love this to go well and you would like to find someone that you really want to spend a lot of time with. But the fact that you didn't isn't because there's something wrong with them, and it isn't because there's something wrong with you either. It's simply because in this market, finding a one-to-one match is a little challenging. There's a lot of moving parts. Only a few of them are going to fit together in a way that works for both parties. So you kind of have to steel yourself to rejection. Go back to thinking about, what product am I looking for and what product am I? Instead of just going on to Tinder, where everyone else is, if you're going to use an app, think about, is this app for example, people who are looking for long-term relationships, or is it going to be filled with people who are looking for a couple of nights? I'm not judging. If that's what you want, go on the appropriate app, but think about what app you want to be on. And if what you would like to find is something longer term, don't go somewhere where you are going to be flooded with people who are just indiscriminately swiping in the hopes that one of these things will land. But think more broadly about what it means to optimize your search. So I met my husband in the backyard of Matt Iglesias, who has been a guest on this podcast. On the one hand, that was entirely serendipitous. I didn't even know that my husband had moved to town. I had read some of his writing in other magazines. I was then working for The Atlantic. But on the other hand, I was in the right place in the right time. And it was a place that was filled with people who were probably going to be a lot like me. A little bit nerdy, fond of words, interested in politics and economics. And as it turned out, one of those people was my future husband. So online dating, the way it's set up, it is set up to shield our egos. We never have to face-to-face confront someone who's rejecting us. They just swipe onwards and we never know about it. And so it's easy to do that low friction kind of search in the same way that it is easy if you are trying to find a job. to go out and just keep spamming resumes endlessly onto business sites. It's low friction, but it's also low effectiveness. It's much more effective to be out there in the real world universe. Why? A few reasons. Number one, it's a lot easier to see through someone's signals. Number two, even if you don't end up matching with the people you meet that night, you will have had fun and done something. But number three, because in a large group, you don't just have the information on someone's profile or the information that they tell you over coffee. You have the information of all the other people who know them. So when you're thinking about a dating search, I'm not saying don't use apps at all, but think much more broadly about where could I be in a physical place? Where could I be embedded with other people? Because that's where I am much more likely to get those network effects. And also to give myself opportunities that I didn't even know existed. My husband was not someone I would have thought about dating because, as I say, I didn't even know he had moved to Washington, D.C. I would never have found that out by looking for him on a dating app. So next thing, understanding comparative advantage. What is comparative advantage? It's one of the most foundational concepts in economics. It means that instead of just assessing what you're absolutely best at, you also have to think about what you're relatively best at. So how do you think about that in your own life? Well, let's start with absolute advantage. So a fun example of this, my grandmother, my grandfather. My grandmother was magnificent in a crisis. My mother used to tell a story where when she went into labor with my Aunt Annie, my grandfather was panicking and trying to get her out of the house and get everything packed and going into the car and realizing he'd forgotten the keys and running around basically like a chicken with his head cut off. My grandmother, meanwhile, is leisurely taking a bath while my grandfather is freaking out and trying to get her to get out of the bathtub and go to the hospital. So finally, he persuades her that she should perhaps go and deliver their baby. And they get to the hospital and she has the baby. And then my grandmother totally falls apart. My grandfather, meanwhile, once the crisis is over, he actually springs into action and he's now good at organizing everything. He's getting all the relatives there and making sure the kids have babysitters and all the rest of that because that was his strength. That's what we call absolute advantage. Each of them was better at something than the other person. But there's also what's called comparative advantage. So even if other people are better at a bunch of things than you are, you probably do some of those things better than others, and you should lean into those things. So, for example, my husband is much neater than I am. But even though he is generally better at keeping our house in order, it's also true that I'm better at some tasks than others. I am definitely not the person you want in charge of reducing the piles of paper. I have never met a piece of paper that I did not want to hoard just in case in 40 years I really need that old gas bill. So Peter has taken over executive decisions about throwing things out. On the other hand, I'm relatively quite good at scrubbing down surfaces. Now, Peter would undoubtedly do a fine job of keeping our counters shining, but that's something I can do while he's busy throwing out the junk mail. If you're still looking for a partner, comparative advantage is also a really useful concept because, you look out there and you compare yourself to other people and you think maybe someone else is more handsome or popular or charming or funny or rich or well-dressed or whatever. Maybe they're more of all of those things than you are. But if you are pretty funny and not very interested in fashion, you're going to get more mileage out of honing your funny bone than you will out of trying to turn into a style icon. You should also think about comparative advantage within the relationship. You specialize in the things that you're best at, like my husband throwing out papers while I clean the counters. Even if your partner is better than you at a bunch of stuff, you can even out the workload by looking for things you're relatively best at and taking on some of the load. A few more things about search. Be ready to make trade-offs. As I say, you can have anything, but you can't have everything. So you have to think about what trade-offs you're willing to make. And this is something that this is at the heart of economics and of business. It's always about what trade-offs you make. What are you willing to give in order to get? And I don't just mean in the context of a relationship where, of course, you should be giving your whole self and hopefully getting their whole self back. But when you think about what's really important to you, often people will have a list of 100 things or 50 or even 10. And 10 is too many because if you think about the major factors in a relationship, other than specialist hobbies, like if you are a passionate rock climber and it will not do unless that person is up on the mountain with you, then yes, you should make rock climber one of your drop dead must-haves. But no one is perfect in all dimensions any more than any product is perfect in all dimensions for any person. And so you got to think about, what are the things that I really need? And those tend to be, if you're thinking for the long term, like, does this person want kids? Are they kind? Are they funny? Do I like talking to them? It's easy to get caught up in other things that seem important in the moment, but what are you going to care about 20 years from now? So the last thing I'll say is this: look for arbitrage opportunities. What is arbitrage? Arbitrage is when the price of something is different in different markets. So what does that mean in the dating market? Look for things that are underpriced where they are. And so let me say, short men are often the biggest arbitrage opportunity for people who are looking for good dating partners. Why? Because on the dating apps, women are determined to have tall men. I have contributed to more than one relationship simply by telling friends, who were, by the way, much shorter than me, to take the height filter off of their dating app. Now, when I was dating, I didn't have a height filter. I've dated guys who were 5'2". I've also dated guys who were 6'10". And it was funny to me that people who were like 5'5" were really, really, really determined to date someone who was over 6 feet tall. Is it just that you like having a crick in your neck? So if you take that filter off, you suddenly gain access to a wealth of guys who are being undervalued by the market. I'm not saying shop the clearance rack, which is how a lot of people hear this advice. I'm just saying question the filters that made you overlook perfectly great human beings. When you take the filter off, you suddenly get access to a wealth of great people, many of whom would probably already be off the market if these filters weren't making people so stupid. So that gives you a valuable investing opportunity, and you should take that opportunity. Now, it's not just height. I'm sure you can think of all sorts of physical characteristics that people are filtering on that just don't ultimately matter that much to a long-term relationship. Because I promise you, what you're going to be worried about in 20 years is, did I pick the right person to be in the foxhole with through all of life's travails? Not, did our wedding photos fit some generic stereotype that society has labeled ideal? So take off those filters and set your search free. All right, so let's say it works. You found someone, you're ready for a relationship. I want to talk a little bit about how thinking about this in a little bit more businessy way can help make that relationship a little better. And the first and most important thing is, think of that relationship as an investment. If it's going to be a long-term thing, things you do now are going to pay off a lot down the road. Every day you're putting in, you are building up capital for the future, in the same way that every time you put money in your 401k, and that's going to grow and grow and compound over time. Don't try to maximize your gains from every transaction. This is a mistake that I see a lot of young couples make. I think probably I made it, is that you think about what you're getting out of the relationship, and you don't think about what you're putting in. But again, this is your 401k. This is what is going to support you through all of life's hurdles and difficulties for at least some time. You want that 401k to be nice and full. So ideally, you should be thinking more about what you're putting in than about what you're getting out. Now, that sounds a little scary. Yes, of course. The future is scary. It's unknown. You have to take some risks. And trusting someone is a risk. It's always a risk. If you aren't afraid to lose it, then the relationship isn't right in the first place. So let's assume that that's where you are. You should be thinking about, am I investing in this relationship? Not what is he investing in me, not what is she investing in me? What am I investing in them? What have I done to make the relationship stronger? Think of the relational capital as kind of like a trust fund. You never want to touch the principal. You just want it to grow and pay dividends in the future. You don't want to be drawing it down by making demands that you don't need. Sometimes you will need to draw it down. Sometimes you're going to be going through a hard time and you're going to need someone else to take care of you, just as sometimes they're going to need that from you. But on an average day, when nothing particular has gone wrong, and when you're just having a normal time, you should wake up and think about, did I make my daily contribution? Is the principal growing? And believe me, there are people out there who are capable of thinking the same way. Okay, so this is the scary part, right? What if they aren't? Well, then I need to introduce you to a concept called sunk costs. A sunk cost is literally what it sounds like. It's like a sunken ship. It's gone. It's at the bottom of the ocean. It's still there. You can't reach it. You can't get it back because it crashed. And it would be very expensive to try to retrieve it. And probably when you pulled it up, the rotted hull would just fall apart. Sadly, sometimes we get to that point in a relationship. In fact, one time I got to that point in a relationship. When I was in my early 30s, I dated someone for several years. It was reasonably serious. We got to the point of talking about marriage. And then he told me that he wanted me to move out. It's not a great day. Can't say it's a fond memory. But here's the real mistake. Here's the memory that really burns. It's the time I invested in trying to get him back. Because here's the thing, the relationship wasn't working before. He was a fine person. We made some mistakes. Nothing terrible. It just wasn't quite working. But the thing was, I've been with this person for years, and now I'm 32, and how am I ever going to find another partner? And the clock is ticking, and I just need to find some way to salvage this relationship. I have invested so much in it. I can't afford to let it go. It's a really common way to think. It's especially, I would say, really common for women who are in their early 30s, but also younger ages, also men. I've seen many men do this. I've put too much into it. I can't let it go of it now. And look, I think once you're married, especially if you have kids, that's a reasonable way to think about it. But before that point, ask yourself, am I trying to save this relationship because it's really the best possible relationship? Or am I trying to save the relationship because I feel like I have wasted a lot of valuable time and I can't get that time back, so I need this relationship to work? The problem with sunk costs is that you can't get them back, right? I spent another year trying to fix this relationship that was broken and that he didn't want to be in. This is not a proud story to relate, but luckily it's a long time ago, so I'm mostly over my shame and embarrassment. But I just wasted more time. I threw good money after bad, and people do this all the time in relationships. I see this with so many people who say, especially women who they want to have kids, they do want to get married by their early 30s. And they're so afraid of all the stuff we talked about earlier, the search costs, all of the frictions, that they just keep doubling down on something that isn't quite working out. And the most important and the most painful thing that you learn in business school is that sometimes you do, even when it's bad, you have to cut your losses and let it go. Now, the funny thing is that at the point where I really just accepted that it was over, 6 months later, I met my husband, and so far so good. It's been 16 years. And something he said to me last night, actually, as we were sitting there, as he said on the couch, just having a cocktail and talking, he said, it took me a long time to realize in our marriage that I needed to wake up every morning and worry about whether and how I was being good to you. And that was also a lesson I learned. And that is the benefit of investment. You get to that point, but you have to work at it. And you have to not try to make investments when other people aren't investing the same amount, right? You have to look, this is a partnership. If someone else isn't as invested as you are, it's time to go. The last thing I'll say is, and this is going to sound a little mercenary, but bear with me, it's not. Pay attention to money. Not in the sense of being a gold digger. Do not marry someone for their money. It will not work out. You are choosing the person that you are going to spend the largest part of your fortune on. You are going to spend the days and seconds and minutes that you have. You don't want to trade that for someone's money because it's not worth the trade. Like I said at the opening, you are priceless. The most important thing is make sure that the person you're marrying is good enough with money that you can get along with them. And again, marriage is not about money, but paying the mortgage is about money. And you're going to have to do that at some point, or paying the rent or paying the car loan. Money is a major cause of divorce because those things can be really stressful. So don't let it be the major cause of your divorce. It doesn't have to be. And it also doesn't mean that you have to be on exactly the same page, because that's pretty rare. It's fine if one person's a saver and the other person's a spender. And yes, you're probably going to argue about that sometimes. But you have to be able to talk about it, and you have to be able to act as partners. And you have to know you can trust this person with your money, because if you can't trust someone with your money, can you trust them with your kids? Can you trust them with all the other parts of your life? Probably not. And so money is an area where people do need to learn to work together, and it's one of the first areas where that happens. So pay attention to it. And so you do pay attention to it, not because you're thinking that this is somehow a money-making enterprise, but precisely because it's not. Because it's a life-making enterprise. Because it is going to give you, if you do it right, the most priceless thing you will ever have, other than those few billion minutes of your life. And that is the person you love more than anything else in the world. But remember, in the end, love is truly priceless. It's the most important thing you will ever have. It is the most valuable thing you will ever have, and it is worth investing everything you've got. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to like this video, and let's keep the conversation going in the comments. What's the best or worst dating advice you've ever gotten or given? Share it down below and subscribe to the channel. In the meantime, I hope you have a very happy Valentine's Day, and I'll talk to you next time.